On a misty winter morning in Silver Ridge, Harry's headlights pierced through the icy white veil, revealing a German shepherd curled beneath an old pine. Her soaked fur was dusted with snow. Her breathing faint, yet in her eyes shimmered a fragile spark of hope. Wrapped in Harry's warmth, she became part of a journey that would sweep through blizzards, shadows, and heart-pounding chases. Behind this story lies a secret about precious lives, and a battle whose true depth can only be understood by those who have witnessed it firsthand. Winter had begun to drape Silver Ridge in a thin yet biting white blanket, leaving a strange stillness over the rolling hills. That morning the fog lay thick, as if trying to wrap itself around every pine trunk and rocky outcrop jutting from the slopes. Bare branches reached out like the arms of the old catching drops of dew that had frozen into tiny crystals, shimmering faintly in the weak light of dawn. From a distance, the road through the forest appeared like a gray ribbon, winding its way between the trees, vanishing and reappearing in the cold mist. Harry sat behind the wheel, gloved hands steady on the steering. The deep blue pickup rumbled with a low, constant hum, its tires crunching softly over the thin layer of snow that had fallen overnight. He had grown up with scenes like this, yet each winter in Silver Ridge carried a different feeling. Today the air felt dense, swallowing every sound, until only the engine's murmur and the faint hiss of wind through the window seemed to remind him that the world was still moving. The forest road was usually empty, but Harry always kept a careful watch on the edges. Over the years, he had seen all kinds of life here. Deer darting across the trail, an owl's wings cutting silently through the fog, even a lone red fox standing still as if studying him. But this morning, when the beams of his headlights pierced the mist, a strange shape appeared against the white-gray backdrop. He slowed, eyes narrowing. Not far ahead at the base of an old pine lay a still form. As the truck crept closer, he saw it was a dog. The thick gray-gold coat, dark along the back, made him think instantly of a German shepherd. Snow clung to its fur, and from the way it lay, he could sense exhaustion, bone deep and absolute. Harry pulled over and stepped out. His breath turned instantly to white mist in the cutting cold. Each step he took left deep prints in the soft snow. As he drew near, he could make out the dog's face, eyes half closed, clouded, yet holding the faintest glimmer of hope. Its chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm, and Harry noticed the curve of its belly. She was pregnant. Her sides strained and her legs trembled each time she tried to lift her head. A wave of compassion swept over him, pulling him to his knees. He reached out slowly, voice low and steady. "Hey, easy now, girl." His hand touched the damp, cold fur, feeling the shiver ripple through her. He knew he had to get her somewhere safe immediately. Without another thought, he shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it gently around her frail body. To his surprise, the dog let out a small sigh and rested her head against his arm as if surrendering her guard at last. In that instant, he felt as though he had become the final harbor she had been searching for. He lifted her, pressing her close for warmth. She was heavier than he expected, but the faint heat of her body made him hold tighter. Her heartbeat thudded softly, merging with his own. Snow crunched under his boots as he made his way back to the truck. Setting her gently on the passenger seat, Harry adjusted the coat around her to trap the heat. When he shut the door and looked over, her eyes were open wider now, fixed on him. In them was a strange mix of weariness, pain, and a fragile trust. He gave a small nod, sealing a silent promise. The truck started with a low growl. Headlights split the fog, carrying them back to the main road. Harry's left hand gripped the wheel, while his right occasionally rested against her side, a quiet reminder that she was no longer alone. Outside Silver Ridge lay hushed. Inside, the faint sound of her breathing pressed him to drive faster toward town. In the distance, the mist thinned, revealing the first rooftops of Silver Ridge. Harry glanced at the clock. There wasn't much time. He needed to reach the veterinary clinic before her condition worsened. His grip tightened, and in the dim light of morning, the blue truck sped toward the center of town, beginning a journey Harry could not yet foresee. The glass door of Brookside Vet Care swung open, letting a gust of cold air rush inside. The warm scent of pine wood furniture mingled with the sharper tang of antiseptic, pushing the frost back outside. Snowflakes clung to Harry's shoulders as he stepped in the German Shepherd, still wrapped in his coat. Gina Brooks, the clinic's owner, was at the reception desk, flipping through a patient file. She looked up, and the calm steadiness in her blue eyes vanished, replaced by sudden concern. "Harry, what's going on?" she asked, voice quick yet still gentle. He strode straight to the examination table and laid the dog down as carefully as if she were glass. "Found her in the forest under the old pine on the North Road. Cold, exhausted, and I think she's pregnant." Gina pulled her stool closer, gloved hands moving with practiced ease to unwrap the coat. Beneath the thick fur was soaked, clinging to a lean frame, yet her belly was full and taut. Clear signs that birth was near. Gina's hands moved gently along her back to her abdomen, reading the contractions. "She's going to have them very soon." "Maybe today," Gina said with certainty. Harry stood close, eyes following every movement. When the dog gave a soft whimper, her deep brown gaze flicking to him before closing again, he bent to place his warm palm on her neck, silently willing her strength. "What should we call her?" Gina asked, as she jotted down the vitals. Harry paused, then met the dog's eyes. "Maya," he said slowly, testing the sound. Gina's lips curved into a small smile. "Maya. It fits. Gentle but strong." As if she understood, Maya opened her eyes and tilted her head slightly. In that quiet moment, Harry felt the invisible thread between them tighten. An unspoken bond formed in the cold, now carrying them into whatever lay ahead. Gina began readying the birthing area. The room brightened under the white glow of the overhead lights. Trays of instruments were neatly arranged, fresh linens laid out in perfect order. Outside, the snow continued to fall, casting an almost complete silence broken only by Maya's steady breathing and the faint tap-tap of Gina's pen. "She needs a few minutes to rest, catch her breath before we begin. Harry, you can stay close. She'll be calmer with you here." Harry pulled a chair right up beside the table, his hands still resting along Maya's back, moving slowly from her neck down. He told Gina how he had found her in the forest. Those slow, deliberate steps through the snow and the look in her eyes desperate yet fiercely enduring. Gina listened, her expression gradually sharpening. "If Maya was wandering in that area, I'm afraid she's come a very long way. And it wouldn't have been easy." Maya shifted slightly, her sharp ears twitching at the sound of wind outside. Harry leaned closer, murmuring, "It's all right, Maya. We're here together now." Moments later, Gina returned with a cup of warm water, handing it to Harry. "Drink. You look frozen through." The heat spread across his fingers as he took it. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink to just 3 souls. Him, Gina, and Maya, waiting for something that was about to arrive. Outside, the first light of day began to slip through the thick fog, streaking pale gold across the warm wooden floor. Harry glanced at Maya quietly, telling himself that this moment would mark the beginning of something larger than he could yet imagine. The glass door rattled faintly under a gust of wind, the wind chime outside giving a soft, lilting note. Gina gave Harry a small nod, ready. Maya stirred, eyes widening as though she knew the moment was drawing near. "Keep her as calm as you can," Gina said softly, voice low but sure. Harry drew a breath, his gaze meeting Maya's. In the winter chill of Silver Ridge, the warmth in her eyes felt like an unspoken promise, leading them both toward the challenge ahead. The clinic was quiet now, save for the ticking of the wall clock and the sound of Maya's breathing. She lay on a soft mattress with an extra blanket over her, yet her ears remained upright, eyes constantly scanning for movement. Each time Gina approached with an instrument or Harry shifted his chair, her body tensed and her tail dipped as if ready to bolt. Harry understood that this wariness was more than just the reflex of a stray meeting humans. It was something deeper, a shadow in her gaze, from a past where she had been forced to defend herself. He knew that if he wanted to help her truly settle, the first step was earning her trust. He edged his chair closer, but didn't reach out. Sitting still, he let the warmth of his presence and the softness of his voice act as an invitation. Maya, strong girl, you're safe here now. His low, even tone mingled with the gentle morning light, creating a small haven of peace. At first, she watched him warily, but then a slow blink and the easing of her breath told him the tension was loosening. At the sink, Gina glanced over and smiled faintly. She knew that for a guarded animal to choose trust was a process, and Harry had just taken the first steps. He didn't rush. Extending his hand, he held it near her nose. She sniffed cautiously, pulled back, then leaned forward again. When her damp nose finally touched his skin, he reached to stroke the side of her neck. This time she didn't recoil, only tilted her head as if weighing the feeling. Gina came closer, her voice low but thoughtful. You know, in this region, every winter, I see cases like Maya. Dogs abandoned, lost in the forest, or left by the roadside. Some survive on instinct, but others... She stopped, leaving the sentence unfinished. Harry's eyes darkened. So Maya's been through far more than I realized before I found her. Gina nodded. The scratches on her, the way she keeps checking every angle, it all points to that. But you're helping her change. Maya shifted again, the tension in her eyes easing as she listened to their voices. Harry bent closer. Maya, we'll face this together. At that moment, outside the window, the late morning sun broke through the fog, spilling a warmer shade of gold across the snow. The room seemed brighter, the earlier cold replaced by something harder to name, but deeply felt. Maya seemed to sense it too. She exhaled slowly, lowering her head onto the blanket, eyes closing though her ears remained alert. Harry knew this fragile trust was still delicate, but it was a start. And for him, having Maya stay beside them was already a flicker of hope for the road ahead. The wind chime tinkled again as another gust passed, carrying with it the feeling that something was coming. A test for all three of them in the days ahead. Under the white glow of the overhead lamp, Maya's wet fur glistened, showing every contour of her frame. Gina's brow furrowed as her gloved hands touched Maya's flank, where the fur parted over a long scratch. The blood had dried, leaving a dark line, the surrounding skin slightly swollen and red. Harry, come look at this, Gina said, her tone dipping. He stepped over and leaned in. Beneath the fur were not one but several scratches, across her side shoulder and near her neck. Some were fresh, still weeping slightly. Others had scabbed over evidence of days-old injuries. These don't look like ordinary scrapes, Gina explained. The edges are too straight, almost like from a wire or net tightening around her. Harry stayed silent, his hand tightening unconsciously. The thought of Maya enduring the forest with these wounds, pregnant and alone, settled like a weight in his chest. As Gina disinfected a scratch on Maya's hind leg, a faint metallic rattle sounded from the glass door, as if someone had touched the handle. Maya's ears shot up her head, snapping toward the sound. Her entire body tensed, muscles tightening under her fur, her breathing quickening. Harry's eyes flicked toward Gina. She laid a hand lightly on his shoulder and murmured, "She's reacting as if she's recognized something, either familiar or dangerous." The noise outside went silent, leaving only the wind sweeping across the eaves. Still, Maya's gaze remained fixed on the door, her deep brown eyes locked on some unseen image beyond the glass. Gina set the antiseptic bottle back on the tray, her expression thoughtful. "Do you remember the rumors a few months ago in Silver Ridge?" she asked in a low voice. People said they'd seen trucks carrying sealed wooden crates on the old forest road to the east. The conservation office suspected it was part of an exotic animal trafficking route. Harry's brow furrowed. "I heard bits of it, but I didn't think it was happening this close to town." Gina glanced at Maya, her tone dropping further. If she was caught or fell from a transport like that, these rope marks make perfect sense. And her reaction to the sound at the door, it could be a memory coming back. Harry turned toward Maya, slowly kneeling down. "Girl, we'll find out what happened to you." Maya didn't take her eyes off the door, but tilted her head slightly toward his familiar voice. In that moment, Harry saw his own resolve mirrored in her guarded gaze, both of them sensing that something out there was watching. Outside, the wind swept in sharp bursts, clinking the wind chime softly. Inside, the smell of antiseptic lingered, but beneath it lay the weight of an unanswered question. One both Harry and Gina knew they would have to face soon. Harry pulled his jacket zipper up, casting another look at the glass door. "Gina, we should be careful. Someone out there might be looking for Maya, and they'll come back." Gina nodded, then moved to check Maya's bedding again. Her hands worked not only to provide comfort, but to prepare for something larger. A story they had only just touched the edge of. Maya eased down, though her ears stayed pointed toward the door like living antennae catching every trace of movement in the unseen air. Harry knew what lay ahead would be anything but simple. And tonight the clinic lights would burn far longer than usual. By late afternoon, the light outside had dimmed to a muted gold, dulled further by fog and a cold wind that gave the streets a dense silver gray. Inside, the air pressed close. After a quick check, Gina looked up at Harry. "It's time." Harry stepped to Maya's side. She lay on the thick blanket, her belly rising and falling with rapid breaths. Muscles along her flanks clenched in rhythmic waves, her eyes half shut, ears twitching at every footstep. The scent of antiseptic mingled with damp fur and the warm breath of the laboring dog, thickening the small room. Gina moved into position. Clean towels, stacked instruments, neatly aligned a basin of warm water, sending up faint curls of steam. Outside, the wind's whistle seemed to keep pace with Maya's contractions. Harry knelt, resting a warm palm along her back, stroking slowly from neck to hip. He could feel each ripple of trembling like undercurrents beneath thick fur. "Come on, Maya." Harry murmured, voice low and steady, a quiet anchor. The first contraction lasted nearly a minute. Maya's eyes flicked toward him, then closed again, breath puffing out in a slow exhale. Gina kept watch, trading short updates with Harry on the rhythm and spacing of the labor. The room held only 3 sounds: the wind outside, Maya's labored breathing, and the slow tick of the wall clock. Then it happened. A deep sound from Maya's throat, her whole body tightening. Gina leaned in skilled hands, guiding the small, glistening shape into the world. Wrapped in a white towel was a newborn. Smaller than Harry had expected, its fur slick and shining. What caught both their eyes was its coloring. Not the familiar black and tan of a German shepherd, but a paler coat, almost silver, tracing the ridge of its back, streaked with deep black over its head and ears. Eyes still sealed, tiny legs twitching, it gave a thin cry that broke the heavy quiet. "This pattern. It's rare," Gina said softly, wiping and checking its breathing. "I've never seen this color combination in our region before." Harry looked at Maya. She had relaxed slightly, the eyes open just enough to glance at her pup. A faint, gentler whimper left her, almost like a call. Gina placed the newborn against its mother, and instinct took over. Maya licked along its back, warmth passing from her body as the pup wriggled toward its first milk. In that instant, the room shifted, from tension to a fragile peace. The golden light from the lamp caught in the pup's damp fur, the silver streaks gleaming like moonlight scattered over snow. But Gina's focus remained sharp. She glanced at the clock, readying for the next. This is only the beginning. There'll be more. Stay close and keep her calm. Harry nodded, edging nearer, his hand on Maya's shoulder, eyes following every movement. He knew the wind still battered the glass outside, and the unease from earlier still lingered. Yet right now, in this small, bright room, a new life had drawn its first breath. And that was the one thing worth holding on to. Outside, the snow began falling heavier, a sign that a long night was on its way. Maya's rapid breaths filled the lamplight bright room, the heat of her body mingling with the scent of antiseptic and the damp cotton of the towels. The first pup lay tucked in the curve of her belly, silver fur glinting faintly as it nuzzled for warmth. But Maya's rest was brief. Another contraction was already building. Harry's hand tightened on her shoulder, feeling each tremor rise. Gina stood at the foot of the table, eyes sharp to the smallest change, her hands already poised. "This one's stronger," she said quietly, a gentle warning for Harry to be ready. A low guttural cry rose from Maya as her whole body tightened, and within moments the second pup slipped into the world. When Gina lifted it, both she and Harry froze. The pup's thick coat burned with a deep reddish-gold hue, and down the center of its forehead ran a fine white streak that trailed to the bridge of its nose, a marking Harry had never seen on any German shepherd before. "This is an extremely rare color variation," Gina murmured, as she swiftly dried the pup and stimulated its breathing. The tiny newborn gave a small sneeze, let out a thin cry, and began to wriggle. Whatever moment of awe passed between them, Gina wasted no time in placing the pup beside its sibling so Maya could lick it dry and guide it toward milk. Maya glanced at her second-born before closing her eyes again, her body still taut in preparation for the next wave. Harry felt a quiet surge of admiration. For in the bite of early winter, carrying her wounds, she still brought life into the world, one effort after another. The third pup arrived soon after. When Gina caught it, Harry saw her eyes widen. "Harry, look at this." This one's coat was nearly jet black, broken only by a patch of white on its chest, shaped like a crescent moon, glimmering beneath the lamplight. Its small ears had yet to stand, but the whole body held a surprising sturdiness. Harry leaned closer, his feelings a mix of amazement and something he couldn't quite name. 3 pups, each so distinctly different, and each bearing unusual traits that defied expectation. He glanced toward Gina, as if for an explanation. But she only shook her head slightly, her expression measured. By now, fatigue was showing in Maya's breathing. Her body was damp with sweat and moisture, yet she still lifted her head to lick each pup, pulling them close against her belly. Harry quickly took a dry towel and dabbed at the dampness along her forehead, his voice low and steady, trying to lend her strength. "Almost there, Maya. Just a little more." As if answering, Maya bore down once more, and the 4th pup arrived. Smaller than its siblings, with fur the shade of ash gray. But at the tip of its tail was a pale gold shimmer, like the last rays of a setting sun. This one cried louder than the others, filling the room with the sound of new life. Jenna worked quickly, drying it, checking its breathing, and tucking it into the warm circle of Maya's body. "They're all breathing well," she announced, her tone easing, though her eyes stayed fixed on Maya. "Now we just need to help her rest and regain her strength." Harry looked at the 4 tiny beings, each with its own color, its own signature, nestled together at their mother's side. The shock of their differences faded into a new determination to uncover the story behind them. But for now, all that mattered was keeping Maya and her litter safe. Outside, the wind blew harder, the wind chime ringing without pause. Harry's thoughts returned to Maya's alertness the day before. Even as the pup's soft cries filled the space, he felt as though a door had just opened. And beyond it, lay answers to her wounds, her wariness, and these remarkable coats. He glanced at Gina. She gave a subtle nod as if she'd read his mind, yet both stayed silent. Tonight they would set aside the questions, holding this moment for Maya and her extraordinary newborns. Beyond the clinic walls, night settled with a thick blanket of fog over Silver Ridge. The wind sharpened, rattling the glass in quick, icy bursts. Inside, the golden light pooled warmly around Maya and her 4 curled pups. The tiny cries mingling with her heavy yet steady breaths, creating a peace so still that Harry and Gina could almost believe the unease had been carried away by the wind. Then from somewhere outside a sound split the calm. A sudden forceful screech of brakes. Tires ground against the damp road, echoing up to the clinic. Both of them looked up instantly. Maya's ears shot forward, her head snapping toward the door, her whole frame rigid. Harry moved quickly to the curtain over the glass door. Through the misted pane, he saw the dim yellowed headlights of a small truck flicker out, leaving only shadow. A figure stood motionless outside. Tall, broad-shouldered face obscured by the brim of a cap. He didn't knock or move toward the door. He simply stood still as a statue. Jenna came up beside him and whispered, "What is he looking at?" Before Harry could answer, the figure tilted his head, and through the haze on the glass, his eyes fixed not on Harry or Gina, but on Maya's newborns. It was a gaze cold as steel, focused, calculating. The chill that ran down Harry's spine had nothing to do with the winter air. A low, sharp growl rumbled in Maya's throat, her stare locked on the man outside. The pups stirred faintly, pressing closer to her warmth. Gina laid a steadying hand on Maya's back, but her eyes never left the shadow beyond the glass. Then, without warning, the man stepped back, turned, and disappeared into the fog. Moments later, an engine roared to life, and the truck sped away, swallowed by the road leading out of town. The glass door quivered in the wind, reflecting the tension on Harry and Gina's faces. "You saw that, right?" Gina's voice was low but certain. "That wasn't someone just passing by." Harry nodded slowly. Gina's earlier words about animal trafficking and mysterious trucks flashing in his mind. Now, looking at the 4 unusual pups, he understood. Their rarity might be exactly why that man had come. He crossed the room to lock the door tight and pull the curtains fully closed, then returned to Maya's side. "We need to be ready. This is just the beginning." Gina began clearing away the instruments, her gaze flicking to the door each time the wind rattled it. "I'll call the ranger station in the morning. If they know, they might send someone to watch the area." Maya lay still again, though her ears twitched at every sound, outside maternal instinct holding her on edge. Harry settled beside her, resting his hand on her shoulder, passing her a calm that he himself was fighting to hold. Outside, the wind still tore through the pines, carrying damp, icy air that slipped into every crack and seam. But inside the clinic, Harry knew this fragile calm would only last so long. Once those eyes had found this place, it was only a matter of time before the door itself was tested. The air after the stranger's departure felt heavy, as if every particle had been chilled solid by that cold stare. Maya lay still. Her breathing slowed, but her ears twitched at every gust of wind outside. The pups pressed close to her belly, their soft whimpers taking the edge off the night's tension. Gina stood at the window, fingers brushing the curtain's edge, her gaze fixed on the fog outside. Suddenly she froze, brows knitting as if tugged back to an old memory. "Harry, I think I've seen him before." Harry, in the middle of changing Maya's bedding, looked up sharply. "We're at the wildlife reserve." East of the forest, Jenna replied, her voice low but steady. 2 months ago, I was there helping with a rescue. An injured bird of prey. I saw him near the holding enclosures, where the most protected species were kept. When the staff asked what he wanted, he just smiled and walked away. Harry braced a hand on the table, thinking. The pieces fit too neatly. The rumors of trucks with sealed crates, the unexplained disappearance of rare species, and now the birth of a litter of pups with markings, unlike any German shepherd he'd seen. If he's been there, the odds he's tied to the trafficking are high, Harry said slowly. And if Maya ever ended up in their hands, then her past is far from simple. Jaina's eyes moved to Maya, who was gently licking each pup, unaware that her life, and theirs, was at the heart of something dangerous. Harry straightened, already mapping a course in his mind. I'll start digging. I've got friends in the Ranger Service and at the Reserve's vet station. If I ask the right way, I can find records of recent shipments, and maybe whether anyone reported losing a dog like Maya. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Gina's voice carried a thin thread of worry. If he's part of a smuggling ring, they won't let you get close. Harry gave a faint, humorless smile, his gaze steady. I've been tracking signs in these woods since I was young. They leave traces whether they mean to or not. And now I have a reason to follow them. Outside, the wind suddenly stilled, leaving a strange, expectant quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Inside, Harry pulled his chair close to Maya, resting a hand along her back. Maya, I promise, I'll find the truth. Jaina tidied the last of the tools, but her gaze stayed on Harry. She knew that once he made a promise, nothing would shake him from it. And this time, the reason wasn't just about protecting a dog. It was about guarding the fragile lives, sleeping at her side, carrying a secret Maya herself might not even know. That night, the clinic light burned on, casting a warm halo into the thick fog. But both of them understood how quickly that halo could be tested by darkness. And the first clue they'd uncovered was only the beginning of a far more dangerous path than they'd imagined. Silver Ridge by night wore a heavy white coat of snow. Flakes drifted lazily from the gray sky, settling on rooftops, lampposts, and the old pines bracing themselves against the cold wind. The pale gold glow from the windows scattered like small campfires, lending a peace so deep that any sound carried sharp in the stillness. Jaina's clinic sat at the edge of town, beside the road into the eastern forest. From the second-floor window, Harry could see the snow-patched road, below the faint tire marks fading beneath fresh layers. The wind moved through the house corners, humming its winter song. Below, Maya and her litter slept soundly, their breaths even broken now and then by a soft cry that warmed the quiet. But within that stillness, Harry noticed something wrong. In the small yard outside, a shadow flitted past, cutting off the lamplight for a split second. He narrowed his eyes, trying to pierce the snow's veil. Seconds later, near the clinic's left corner, another movement. A slower one, deliberate, like someone stepping with care. He went down the stairs without a sound. Gina, writing notes about Maya's delivery, looked up at him. "What is it? I think there's someone outside," Harry said, his voice firm but quiet. A quick glance passed between them. Then Gina dimmed the room lights to keep from being silhouetted, giving them a clearer view out. They moved to the window, the snow-white street framing a town steeped in darkness. The figure appeared again, this time clearer. A tall build, broad shoulders, dark coat dusted with snow hood, pulled low over most of his face. He stopped beneath the old pine, only a few meters from the clinic's door. He wasn't looking toward the road. His eyes were fixed on the window where Maya and her pups slept. Maya seemed to sense it instantly. She sprang up, planting herself between her pups and the glass hackle's high eyes locked on the dark shape outside. A low, rolling growl rose from her throat, enough for Harry and Gina to understand her protective edge had reached its peak. The man stood there for a few seconds, motionless as stone. Then slowly he stepped back into the snow, disappearing behind the weathered wooden fence. But Harry knew it wasn't retreat, just a shift to another vantage point. Gina shut the window and latched it tight, her voice taut. That's the same man from last night. I'd know that look anywhere. Harry nodded, his eyes still on the shadowed spot where the man had been. We'll stay on guard all night. I'm not leaving. Outside, the snow kept falling, silent, steady, and unbroken. But for Harry and Gina, this was no longer a quiet night. A heavy foreboding had settled between them, the sense that the darkness over Silver Ridge was drawing closer with every step, its target lying right here in this warm little room. Morning in Silver Ridge greeted Harry with a thin veil of mist draped over the road leading out of town. The mountains in the distance lay swaddled in white, the pale sun cutting through the gray clouds in soft, hazy beams that streaked the snow. Harry drove his old pickup, a stack of photographs on the passenger seat. Prints of Maya's pups from the night before, each one carefully developed for close study. The wildlife reserve sat at the eastern edge of the forest, a large timber building with a steep, snow-covered roof and a weathered sign carved with a soaring eagle. Inside, the scent of pine mixed with the dry smell of old paper and the damp of clothes hanging near the fire. Harry was led to the office of Marcus, a veteran conservationist with more than 30 years devoted to the study of the region's wildlife. His hair was silver and shoulder length, his deep brown eyes always seeming to measure something unseen, and his desk was buried in books and files. Harry placed the stack of photos on the desk. I need you to look at these. They're the litter of a dog I found in the forest recently. Marcus adjusted his glasses, lifting each photo toward the desk lamp. The first drew no reaction, but at the second, the fiery red-coated pup with the white blaze down its forehead, his brows pulled tight. At the third, the jet-black pup with a crescent of white on its chest, he looked up sharply at Harry. Where did you find them? Marcus's voice was low, each word deliberate. Harry told him everything, from the forest road and finding Maya under the pine, to the delivery at Gina's clinic and the stranger who had appeared in the night. By the time he finished, Marcus was leaning back, his eyes weighted with thought. These are not ordinary pups, he said slowly. They're the product of a specialized cross between a German shepherd and a rare northern European hunting dog. This breeding isn't legally recognized. It's tied to selective trait experiments for commercial gain. Harry's brow furrowed. You mean someone deliberately created them? Exactly. And they carry traits of exceptional rarity, scenting ability far above average, extreme endurance, and distinctive coat patterns. On the black market, each pup could fetch the price of a brand new truck. The room went still. Harry looked back at the photos, the unease in him deepening. He thought of the cold eyes outside the window last night. Not the gaze of curiosity, but of someone already calculating the worth of each fragile life. Marcus continued. If that man has already found the clinic, they're being watched. You need to protect them at all costs. Harry nodded, his plan already forming. He would return to Silver Ridge immediately and speak with Gina about moving Maya and the pups somewhere safe, at least until they knew who was behind this. Before he left, Marcus gave one last warning. Be careful, Harry. Rare hybrid traffickers rarely stop at watching. Once they know you have them, they'll find ways to make you hand them over. Harry gripped the door handle, meeting Marcus's eyes with steady resolve. That's not going to happen. The cold wind bit at his face as he stepped outside, but his blood was running hot. Silver Ridge lay quiet under its blanket of snow, but he knew the shadows were already closing in. And he was ready to fight for Maya and her pups, no matter who the enemy was. On the drive back from the reserve, the truck's tires crunched through the thick snow, the sound steady beneath him. Marcus's voice still echoed in his mind, a warning not veiled but as sharp and clear as an alarm bell. They will stop at nothing to take them. When the truck rolled to a stop outside the clinic, Gina was waiting at the door, arms wrapped tight against the cold, her breath spilling in pale streams. One look at Harry's face and she knew. Whatever news he'd brought, it wasn't good. Inside, Maya lay curled around her pups, her eyes flicking toward the door at every sound. Harry set the photos and Marcus's notes on the table before sitting opposite Gina. Marcus confirmed it, he began. They're an extremely rare hybrid worth a fortune on the black market. That's why people have been showing up here. Gina said nothing, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup until the ceramic gave a faint crack. And what did he say to do? He told me we have to move Maya and the pups somewhere safe immediately. Every day we stay here, the danger grows. Gina's answer came quick. Moving them now is risky. The pups are too young to handle the cold. The forest roads are slick, and if someone's watching us, we could be ambushed on the way. Harry leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. Staying put isn't any better. If they decide to act, this clinic won't stop them. Gina walked to Maya's side, watching the tiny sleeping bodies pressed to her belly, then turned back, her voice slow but firm. All right, but we do it with a plan. We move in daylight when there are still people around town, and we pick a route no stranger can tail us on. I'll get heated carriers ready, plus food and medical supplies. Harry nodded, though impatience lingered in his voice. I'll contact a friend in the ranger service, have them set up a checkpoint at the southern junction. If anyone follows us, we'll know. Outside, the wind battered the windows, shaking loose a few brittle branches onto the snow. They exchanged a long look, tension clear, but matched by determination. Both knew their arguments only served one purpose: to find the surest way forward. Because the goal was the same: keep Maya and her pups safe. Gina carefully spread another thick blanket over Maya's nest, murmuring as if to herself, "We'll get you and your babies somewhere safe, no matter how far we have to go." Harry stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the window, as though expecting that dark silhouette to emerge from the snow at any moment. In his mind, a plan was already taking shape. This time, they would leave on their own terms, and they would not slip quietly out of Silver Ridge. If the man intended to follow Harry, would make sure he revealed himself. Outside, snow fell without pause, erasing the line between sky and ground. But inside the clinic, the air had shifted. No longer the passive fear of being hunted, but the readiness for a decisive step. A journey away from the familiar into an uncertain place, where safety was still a question, but hope glowed like a winter fire. That morning, Silver Ridge seemed deeper in the stillness of winter. The old pines stood frozen under fresh snow. Rooftops, fences, and weathered roadside signs locked in the pale grip of the season. The snowfall from the night before had hidden most of the town's traces, but the pristine whiteness made anything out of place stand out more. Harry left the clinic early, intending to gather more supplies for the trip. But as he approached his gate, something stopped him. The snow in front was uneven. A set of deep, evenly spaced depressions stretched from the roadside to his porch. He crouched to examine them, boot prints, large with heavy tread, the kind used for hiking or moving through rough terrain. The snow had partially filled them in, but the direction was clear. They led right to his door, circled twice, then disappeared into a narrow trail toward the woods. Harry measured the stride. Tall, long steps. Someone moving with intent, not wandering. And then at the top step, he saw what made his blood surge. A worn leather dog collar torn at the clasp with a few long brown hairs clinging to it. He knew the type instantly, a hunting dog's collar. The sense of intrusion spread through him like ice. This wasn't distant surveillance anymore. It was a message placed right at his door. "I've been here, and I know what you have." Harry gripped the collar until his knuckles went white. In his mind, he saw Maya and her pups, frail, oblivious, and unaware of the danger closing in. He turned the truck around and drove straight back to the clinic. Gina was packing medicine in transport crates. She looked up and froze at the sight of his face. Harry set the collar on the table, his voice low and hard. "He was at my house." Gina's eyes moved from the collar to Harry, a deep worry flashing across her face. That's a warning, and his way of telling us he can get close anytime he wants. Outside, the wind was rising, whipping the snow into small spirals across the porch. In that moment, Harry knew the truth. The man wasn't just watching anymore. The hunt had begun. He drew a steady breath, keeping his tone even. "We moved sooner than planned. Tonight." Gina nodded without hesitation. They both understood that every minute they waited was another chance for him to close in. In her pen, Maya suddenly lifted her head, ears pricked high as if her instincts had caught the scent of the stranger still lingering in the wind. Beyond the walls, those boot prints still scored the snow leading into the forest. The hunter's trail was set, and the race had officially begun. That night, the sky over Silver Ridge seemed to drop lower, swallowing the last frail glow of the street lamps. The wind screamed in long bursts, rattling the windows, flinging ice-sharp flakes against the glass. The brittle crack of branches hitting the tin roof echoed through the clinic, drumming a restless rhythm that promised an uneasy night. Harry had just latched the back door when the lights went out. Darkness wrapped the room in a dense shroud, leaving only the wind and the patter of snow against the walls. A faint electrical pop sounded somewhere distant, then silence. Gina fumbled for a flashlight. Its small yellow beam swept over shelves of medicine metal cages and finally stopped in the corner, where Maya stood rigid before her pups. She wasn't lying down as usual. Every muscle was taut, ears forward, eyes dark and gleaming in the light. A sharp, urgent bark broke from her throat, one after another, quick and insistent. The pups stirred, letting out soft, high cries. Harry and Gina exchanged a look. They both knew Maya never reacted like this, unless something was truly there. Harry grabbed a second flashlight and moved to the east window. The beam cut through the swirling snow, but beyond the shifting white, he saw nothing clear. Still, the sense of being watched pressed cold at the back of his neck. "It could be him," Harry said quietly, his tone certain. Gina double-checked the locks and pulled an extra windboard over the front door. Her eyes flicked often toward Maya, who hadn't moved from her guard, her gaze tracking the direction of the wind as though mapping the intruder's position. Then came a sound from the back, soft over the snow, followed by the faint scrape of claws or boots on wood. Harry switched off his flashlight instantly, signaling Gina to stay silent. They held their breath, hearing only the thud of their own hearts. Maya growled low, stepping toward the sound, her body angled ready to spring. The blizzard raged harder, masking everything under its howl, but they both knew. Whoever was out there was using the storm as perfect cover. "We can't wait for morning," Gina whispered, her eyes fierce. "If we stay, we're boxed in." Harry nodded. He stepped back to Maya, laying a hand on her neck in reassurance. She stayed tense, but at his touch the barking stilled, her breathing still sharp, her eyes fixed on the dark beyond the rear wall. They began packing fast. Medicine bags, transport crates, food and warm blankets. Outside, the blizzard smothered Silver Ridge in a blind white haze. But inside the darkened room, a plan was taking shape in the midst of the wind's howl and Maya's urgent warning barks. Through the chaos of the storm, Harry caught a different sound. A faint metallic click, sharp and out of place. It wasn't a branch against the door. It was the sound of metal against metal. The sound of a lock being tested. He and Gina locked eyes. In the weak yellow beam of the flashlight, the front door trembled, then a shadow slid into the dim spill of light. Even without a clear look at the face, Harry knew the shape, tall, lean, but solid, broad-shouldered, each step deliberate and sure. Maya's growl deepened as she lunged to block the pups. The tiny bodies quivered under the blankets, eyes still sealed shut. A rush of adrenaline surged through Harry. There was no time for hesitation. "I'll get them out the back," he said quickly, voice low but cutting through the noise. Gina understood instantly. She gripped the largest flashlight and stepped toward the intruder, now crouching at the partially open door. The beam slashed across his face, forcing him to raise an arm to shield his eyes. In that brief instant, Gina shouted, both to startle him and to signal Harry to move. Harry slid each pup into the carrier with quick, practiced hands. Maya followed, close eyes locked on the intruder. When Harry threw open the back door, a wave of freezing air slammed into them, stinging his face with a spray of needle-sharp snow. He gripped the carrier tight and pushed into the yard. Up front, Gina kept him occupied with sharp, unpredictable sweeps of the light, forcing him to shift and blink, unable to gauge her exact position. Maya, running alongside Harry, kept glancing back, her growl rolling like distant thunder, as if fighting the instinct to turn and defend. Harry stopped at the rear corner of the yard, sheltering behind a large plank wall. From here he could see the front, see the intruder lower his arm and step forward despite the glare. Gina backed away slowly, keeping the light fixed on him, denying him a clear view of the room. A sudden clang rang out. Gina had knocked over a metal rack. He flinched toward the noise, and in that heartbeat, Harry signaled Maya. Together they slipped into the narrow lane, leading straight to the forest road. The storm swallowed the sounds behind them. Harry, glancing back, caught a flicker of Gina's light before she retreated, the back door slamming shut. The man didn't react in time. She was gone from sight. The wind, the snow, the crunch of boots, each sound fell into a pounding rhythm. Harry knew this was only the opening move. But tonight, thanks to their timing, Maya and her litter had dodged the first strike of the hunt. The night air cut like blades, the gusts lashing against his skin, burning his breath. Harry clutched the carrier tight, every step sinking to his calves in snow. Beside him, Maya kept pace, ears erect, breath pouring from her like steam, eyes scanning the darkness as though ready to meet any threat head-on. Behind them, Gina carried the weakest pups, wrapped in a blanket, her other hand lifting the flashlight to find their path. Its pale beam lit skeletal trees and waves of snow curling through the wind. Each step forward felt like fighting the storm's grip, but the shadow behind them pushed them faster. "How far?" Gina shouted over the roar. 2 miles, Harry answered without breaking stride. "South Junction. The rescue team's waiting." The storm crushed sound, but now and then, Harry caught the faint crunch of snow being parted in the wrong rhythm. He didn't need to turn. He knew the pursuer was still there. Every heartbeat, every step through the drifts was a race against the dark. Maya suddenly stopped, swinging her head toward the left with a sharp growl. Harry knew instantly the main path was no longer safe. He motioned for a change of course, angling them across a low ridge. The snow was deeper, the wind harsher, but their trail would be harder to follow. They descended snow, swallowing their knees. Gina slipped, but Harry caught her before she fell. Their eyes met for an instant, and no words were needed. They couldn't afford weakness now. A wolf's howl rose from somewhere far off, threading through the wind, tightening the air between them. Maya surged ahead, taking the lead, as if her body itself was a shield. Snow clung to her coat in icy clumps, but her eyes burned bright, unwavering. When the faint glow of the outpost broke through the white, Harry's chest filled with a burst of strength. He looked back. Gina's face was flushed from the cold, lips pale, but her footing was steady. They were walking a line between survival and disaster, but the belief that they could protect Maya and her young kept them moving. Only a few hundred meters left, but behind them the crunch of pursuing steps was closer. The gap was closing. Harry tightened his grip on the carrier and drove forward, every muscle bent on reaching the light before any hand could reach what he carried. Through the storm, they were small points of flame in an endless white burning, with a will no wind could smother. Tonight that fire would carry them to safety, or into the final fight. When the rescue station's lights came into full view, Harry and Gina nearly threw themselves into its glow like survivors breaking the surface after drowning. The heavy wooden door swung wide, and a rush of warm air and pine smoke wrapped around them like arms. Inside, several conservation officers stood waiting, bundled in thick coats, their faces drawn tight against the weather and the urgency of the night. As soon as they stepped inside, Harry set the carrier down and pulled back the blankets, letting Maya and her pups breathe the warm air. Maya lay down immediately, her gaze locked on the door alert, as if ready to spring at the first sign of danger. An older man with silver hair threaded with white stepped forward, kneeling beside her. He laid a gentle hand on her neck and murmured a few words as though speaking to an old friend. This is Maya," he asked, looking up at Harry and Gina, a mix of astonishment and relief in his eyes. Gina nodded and Harry asked directly, "You know her?" The man drew a long breath before answering. Maya was once one of the rarest animals in the National Reserve. She was stolen nearly a year ago, vanished along with several others. We searched everywhere but found only traces of a few. Maya, we thought we'd never see again. Harry's fists tightened. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. If she was already pregnant, then the man went on the poachers would have planned to sell the pups to international trafficking networks. A rare hybrid litter like this on the black market is worth. He stopped short, unwilling to name the figure. And I'm afraid the man following you is one of those involved in the theft. The room seemed to grow heavier. Gina lowered herself beside Maya, resting a hand on her back as though to steady both the dog and herself. "Do you know who he is?" she asked. The man gave a slow nod. "I believe it's Viktor Malenkov. He was investigated in Europe for poaching and trafficking endangered animals. Disappeared a few years ago. And it seems he's found his way here." A wave of anger surged in Harry's chest. He looked at Maya, her body still trembling with exhaustion, yet her eyes deep and bright like a fire that had never gone out. He understood now that what they had just endured was only a small part of the ordeal she had survived. "So what do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady. The man stood moving to the large table in the center of the room. He spread a map of Silver Ridge and the forest stretching to the border. "We'll move Maya and the pups to a secure facility. But the storm has blocked the main roads. The only route left is along the eastern mountain slope." His finger traced a thin, twisting line. "It's also the most likely place for him to set an ambush." Outside, the wind still tore in bursts, but inside, the silence after his words felt like confirmation. This was far from over. Harry looked at Gina, and then both turned to Maya. In the warm lamplight, she lifted her head as if she understood her fate, and her pups now lay in these people's hands. Harry tightened his grip on the carrier straps, his eyes set with resolve. From here on, they weren't just protecting a dog and her litter. They were facing one of the most dangerous hunters in the world. In the small wooden rescue station, the firelight flickered over faces drawn, but determined. The wind rattled the windows, but inside they bent together over the map. Harry stood at its side, his finger following the narrow track along the eastern slope. Jenna sat opposite, jotting quick notes, while the silver-haired man and a younger ranger named Caleb explained the terrain. "If he's tracking your trail, this choke point is his best chance," Caleb said, tapping a thin curve clinging to the cliffside. "But it's thick with ice. Without the right preparation, our own people could be at risk." Harry nodded. "We'll use the main road as bait. Jaina and I will lead Maya and a decoy crate along it. The rest of you stay hidden in the tree line above, covering the curve." Jaina added, "We'll set steel netting and stakes at the far end. When he closes in the teams, on both sides we'll seal the trap. The key is keeping Maya and the pups far from this spot." The older man's gaze was thoughtful but firm. I'll take charge of moving Maya to safety. He'll be focused on you, and that's when we end this." The group moved quickly into preparation. Caleb and Harry hauled steel mesh ropes and camouflaged tarps from the storage shed. Gina checked flashlights, radios, and signal flares for emergencies. Outside, the cold bit into skin, each breath burning as they worked. Harry's hands numbed quickly as he and Caleb anchored the netting at the chosen spot. They kept to silence. Only the crunch of snow under boots and the rasp of rope through gloves broke the stillness. Gina and another ranger laid a false trail from the station to the main road, ensuring any tracker would believe Maya was being transported. Each footprint was placed with care, leading straight to the trap site. When all was ready, they returned to the station to rest. Harry sat beside Maya, stroking her warm coat. Her eyes met his steady and trusting. She wasn't just something to protect. She was the living emblem of all the innocent lives hunted for profit. Across the room, Gina was double-checking gear. She glanced over. "This time we end it, Harry." He lifted his head, offering a faint but certain smile. "For Maya, and for all the others he's taken." Outside, the storm still churned, but in the small cabin the plan was clear. All they had to do was wait for dawn. Then the confrontation would begin. Dawn over Silver Ridge was no soft light that day, but a muted gray bleeding into the white expanse. Snow still fell in gentle sheets, weighing down the pines, making the mountainside eerily still. At the curve along the eastern slope, the rangers Harry and Gina waited in position, ready for the ambush. Harry and Gina carried the decoy transport crate, its interior holding only a few folded blankets and a sack of sand for weight. They followed the trail of footprints they had prepared the night before, moving slowly, deliberately enough to suggest they were guarding something precious. Meanwhile, Maya and her puppies had already been guided by the silver-haired old man and two other team members along a distant hidden route toward the safe base. Caleb, along with three others, lay in wait on the slope concealed behind thick pine branches, their eyes fixed on the narrow trail below. Beneath the snow, a net of steel mesh and sharpened stakes lay carefully set, ready to drop with a single signal. Near the bend, Harry caught a sound in the snow, different from the soft crunch of his own boots. He glanced at Gina, and in that fleeting exchange of eyes, a silent message passed between them. "He's here." Out of the drifting snow emerged a tall, broad figure. Viktor Malenkov. His dark winter coat was crusted with frost, but the cold glint in his eyes cut sharper than the wind driven by hunger and calculation. He moved quickly, shadowing the trail with the relentless focus of a predator who had locked onto his prey. Harry deliberately slowed his pace, leaving room for Viktor to close in. Jenna kept her role as the one leading the crate, her glances darting nervously to the trees as though fearing an ambush, making the bait all the more convincing. When Viktor was just a few paces behind, Harry tilted his head ever so slightly. In that instant, Caleb and the others yanked the ropes from either side of the slope, and the steel net slid down in a swift cascade, collapsing over the poacher. He thrashed violently, shouting curses in a foreign tongue, but his struggle only pulled the mesh tighter. One conservation officer dashed in, pinning Viktor's arms behind his back with practiced precision, while another stripped the hunting knife from his belt. Beneath the scarf that half covered his face, his expression was pure fury. But he knew the trap had closed. Harry stepped forward, meeting the man's eyes, those same eyes that had once threatened Maya and her young. He said nothing, letting the steady weight of his gaze speak for him until Viktor was bound and led down the mountain. Jaina bent over, bracing her hands on her knees, letting the winter wind sting her flushed cheeks. It worked. Maya's safe now. Caleb gave a small smile. She's already on her way to the base. This time, no one will ever touch her again. The wind whistled through the pines like a curtain falling on the scene. Snow kept drifting down, but in their hearts, something warm had already taken root. This wasn't only about saving a dog and her litter. It was about defending the principle that every living creature deserves the right to live free from the hunt. As they left the bend, Harry turned back one last time. The footprints on the snow were already fading into the white, but in his mind, the image of Maya with her puppies, safe, whole, and at peace, was crystal clear. That was why they had fought. The road back to Silver Ridge felt longer than usual, but lighter than the weary days before. In the truck bed, Maya lay in the open crate, her head resting against the side eyes, calm as they followed the snowy world outside. Her puppies, warm and bundled in blankets, slept in a curled heap, their tiny breaths syncing with the hum of the wheels rolling over snow. From behind the wheel, Harry checked the rearview mirror now and then, reassured each time he saw Maya at ease. In the cabin, Gina stroked the downy fur of a sleeping pup in her lap, a quiet smile on her face. They spoke little, but the silence brimmed with the comfort they had been longing for. Harry's cabin sat at the edge of town, backed by a wall of old pines with a broad yard blanketed in snow. When the truck stopped, the crunch of the tires was replaced by the gust of winter air as the doors opened. Harry lifted Maya down first, setting her gently so she wouldn't slip on the frozen ground. She lifted her head to take in the low-roofed cabin, her ears twitching as if she were catching the hum of something unfamiliar, but welcome. Inside, the wood stove had been burning since morning flames, dancing with a cheerful crackle, spilling warmth into every corner. Jaina spread a thick blanket in the coziest spot by the fire for Maya and her pups. The little ones wiggled over to their mother, nudging and curling into her side, the soft rustle of fur and blankets forming the picture of a simple, perfect family. In the days that followed, the cabin settled into a new rhythm. At dawn, Harry lit the fire while Maya padded into the yard beside him, leaving a scatter of small prints on the snow. Each time the wind picked up, she glanced toward the door, making sure her pups were safe inside. Gina often stopped by in the afternoons, bringing food and little toys. She laughed when the pups began to explore, clumsy on their paws but full of energy. One chased the golden beam of sunlight across the floor, while another burrowed into the rug by the stove, content in its little nest. Laughter became a regular sound in the cabin, mingling with the aroma of Harry's stew and the soft crackle of the fire. What had once been a quiet shelter was now alive, a true home where both humans and animals could find safety and joy. One evening, as snow fell silently on the porch, Harry sat in his wooden chair, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, his gaze resting on Maya's head as it lay on Gina's lap. He knew that the world outside might still be unpredictable, but here within these walls they had found a place that belonged to them. Gina's voice was low, warm, like the glow from the stove. This is where Maya and her babies were meant to be. Harry smiled, looking out the window at the slow, steady snowfall. He felt the heat of the fire, the trust in Maya's eyes, and the quiet hum of life growing within this home. A roof, 4 walls, and the bond they had forged. This was their shelter, their peace, and the beginning of their next chapter. That morning in Silver Ridge was gentle as though the blizzard had never come. Winter light, pale and clear, spilled through the window, catching on dust motes drifting in the warm air. Tiny sparks floating slowly, like the quiet promise of days ahead. Harry sat on the wooden chair by the window, one hand gently stroking Maya's warm, soft fur. She lay with her head resting on his lap, eyes half closed, her breathing steady and deep, as if savoring every moment of peace. In the corner, her puppies were curled in a thick blanket, sleeping soundly, their tiny ears twitching now and then at the soft crackle of burning wood. Outside, snow fell lightly like strands of white silk, quietly blanketing the yard and the porch roof. The world seemed to slow, giving those inside the chance to hear their own hearts more clearly. For Harry, the only sounds that mattered now were Maya's breathing and the faint whisper of wind threading through the pines behind the cabin. Jaina arrived carrying a basket of freshly baked bread and a flask of hot tea. She stepped in, smiling at the sight. Harry sitting still, Maya resting against him, and the puppies sleeping soundly. Without a noisy greeting, she set the basket down on the table and quietly took a seat across from him, joining him in watching the snow fall. After a while, Maya opened her eyes, looked out the window, then turned to Harry. In her gaze was something deep and warm. Like she knew the storms had passed, and this was where her peaceful days would begin. Harry leaned down and murmured, "You're home now, Maya." No one spoke of the days fleeing through snowstorms, the tense moments under a predator's shadow, or that sharp confrontation on the mountain slope. All of it had faded into the past, leaving only a small wooden cabin, its warmth, and the living souls who had found a safe place to grow. Harry knew life would still bring its share of difficult roads, but he also knew that courage and love, when given to the right place, could change the fate of any living being. He had seen it in Maya, in the way she protected her young, and in Gina's willingness to step into danger for their sake. Snow continued to fall on the porch as though drawing a quiet curtain on a long and grueling journey. Inside, the fire burned steadily, its glow touching the faces of those who had faced every trial together. Here, hope was not a luxury. It was tangible, warm, and steadfast like Maya's breath in that moment. Harry leaned back against the chair, letting time drift, letting winter hold them in its quiet embrace. A winter of hope, where every moment stood as proof that sometimes the most precious things are not what we search for, but what we are willing to protect with all our hearts. The story of Harry, Gina, Maya, and her pups is not just a tale of escaping danger. It is a living testament to the power of love and perseverance. From the early bitter days of winter in Silver Ridge, Maya, the brave German shepherd, faced fear pursuit and nights of unrelenting blizzards. Yet step by step, with human companionship, she found her way back to a home where every life was valued. German shepherds are known for their intelligence, loyalty, and deep affection. Maya proved that when given the chance, they not only protect what they love, but also inspire people with their courage and devotion. She stands as a reminder that every living being, no matter the hardships they've faced, deserves a life of peace. This story reminds us that loving animals is not just about caring for them, but also about protecting them from harm and standing up for their safety and right to live. When humans and animals share empathy and understanding, every barrier between species fades away. Winter in Silver Ridge has ended, but the warmth of this story lingers. It reminds us to cherish each peaceful moment, nurture compassion, and believe that love has the power to change the fate of anyone, of any living soul.